Welcome to today's YouTube video. In this video, I'm going to be teaching you how to build a mining computer based on a regular PC, just using Windows. I have everything laid out here on a table. We're going to need a power supply, a motherboard, a graphics card, which we're going to be mining on, a CPU, a RAM stick, and an SSD of any kind so we can put our OS on. Now this here is a thermal compound, and this USB stick here has our OS loaded on it, which we're gonna take and put on a regular SSD that we have. And obviously we have our set of tools here. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our motherboard over here and put a CPU inside of it. So we're gonna take everything else off. So for this part, we only need our motherboard, CPU cooler, and the thermal compound to merge those two together. So let's just get right into it. Here we have our motherboard. So for this step here, we're just gonna need to unpack our plate, which we're gonna need later when we install it in the case, and take our motherboard out. Please proceed with care. So to install the CPU, we're gonna take this out. I'm gonna set it down right here very carefully. And your CPU would go right into this slot. And we're gonna take this out to open it up. I purposely did not remove the cover because it will pop right out as soon as we seat the CPU in. Now, the CPU has a marking on either side of it. In this case, there is a little small triangle right here, and it's gonna match to a circle on the bottom left of this motherboard. Now you wanna carefully pick it up without touching the bottom pieces to not put any grease or dirt on it, and slowly and carefully place it into the CPU tray. And just give it a little tug to make sure it's in the right spot. And all you do now is just lower the cover back down, like so. Put it under the nut and drop the retaining clip and secure it in place. So we have installed our CPU, and now we need to install our cooler. So for this step, we need to put thermal compound on a CPU to ensure that the metal is getting all the heat transferred over from the CPU. And I'm using this Arctic Silver, and we're gonna just twist it off to open it up. You don't really need too much of it. We're gonna carefully put like a little X on the CPU. That's how I like to do it. We want it to go into the little holes on the motherboard for the pins. And now when you have everything situated, you want to plug in your fan into the corresponding CPU fan, where this one is right here, CPU, and you want to make sure that all of your wires are out of the way of the fan. It doesn't have to look pretty for my purposes, and that's perfectly fine. Next, we're going to install some RAM, and I only have one 8 gig stick to run Windows. If you're not running Windows but running Linux, you can get away with one 4 gig stick. But I'm going to be running Windows, so we're going to open this up and we're going to set this into channel 1. For mine, it is this third slot over here. So we're just going to carefully make sure that it lines up. So after it does, we're going to slightly push on it until you hear a click. This is time for the next step. This is the big one. We're going to put the SSD that we have. I have an M.2 drive, and then at 30-degree angle, we're gonna slide this into the M.2 slot until it clicks. It's gonna stay popped up like that until we put our screw inside of it. And this is where we need our screwdriver, where we take a Phillips head, put our screw on it, and then gently push it down and mount it directly into the motherboard. It doesn't have to be super tight, just very, very soft, as long as it's staying down and it's snug. That's all that matters. Now at this point, we are ready to install the motherboard into the computer case. Now for this next part, we're gonna need to take our case, and spoiler, I already installed the power supply. It's just 4 screws, nothing crazy. For this part, we're gonna be installing the motherboard inside the computer itself. And first we're gonna have to take off the front cover. So the case would come with a bunch of screws. So now we're gonna take our piece that came with the motherboard and place it inside the case. Now, the way this works is inside the case, you're gonna have an opening, and you just wanna line this up facing outside so that the hole doesn't stay a hole. And then it just simply snaps in with just a little bit of force. Now you wanna be very careful because it is extremely sharp, and if you're not careful, you will cut your fingers on it. We're gonna take our motherboard and carefully line it up. And then we're gonna need 6 screws for this one, but again, yours could need a very different amount. So I like starting in the middle, so we're just gonna drop it in and twist the screw in. All right, now that we have all our 6 screws in, I'm gonna put our case fan on channel 3. All right, so your power supply would come with cables needed to connect your motherboard. The motherboard uses a big 24 pin, and it plugs into your power supply with a split 18 and 10 pin connectors. Now both pins need to be connected. I could suggest that if you know exactly what you're going to be plugging in, to plug in all the wires before you install your power supply. And then you're going to need a second cable. This one is an 8-pin going to your CPU, which would plug into, again, the corresponding spot on your power supply. And then that would usually typically go to the top of your motherboard. Run your wires for your GPU, which we're going to install shortly. And so we're going to take our 8-pin connectors and connect them to the top of our motherboard. Here is one, and then here is the second half of it. It is a split one. Then we're going to take our 24-pin connector and do the same thing here. Plug it in directly into the motherboard. And now we're going to get to our fun stuff, like the graphics card. And I have a GTX 3070 that's going to go into this case. And it's a 2-slot card, so we're going to take off 2 plates. Here's 2. Now we're going to plug in our graphics card into a PCIe slot. Here is our beautiful Asus Dual 3070. And this is going to be a 1 GPU starting mining rig, which is why we only have 1, and we're using a PC case. Exactly what we need. So you're just going to give it a little bit of a push. Connect the GPU by plugging in the power. Just like so. Super simple. Feed the excess wire back down. And the remainder, what's left, is our audio and our power. Power button connected. And at this point, the only thing that is left is for us to tie down the GPU. I'm going to do that real quick right here. And now the GPU is nice and snug. We are actually ready to turn it on. So all I'm going to do now is just make them sit a little nicer, so nothing is touching the back of the motherboard. Don't want that to be happening. And now we're ready to just put our back cover on, just like so. All right, so we have our power cord connected, and now we're gonna turn our power supply on. Nothing is happening. And now we are gonna reach for our power button. As you may notice, it's a different time of the day now. We ran into an issue where the power supply was faulty and I just shut down the video. So sometimes the components you get, even if they are brand new, could give you a bunch of issues. Currently, we are installing Windows, and all you have to do in order to install Windows is take your boot drive, which is a USB stick in my case, plug it in, and then the computer does everything on its own. To get into the installation media, you go through some settings, and here we got Windows. Now we want to turn everything off because we don't need it. We want to have the least amount of functions in Windows to bother us and to keep us from getting what we need. Now, as you see, we already have Windows on it. And at this point, all we gotta do is just wait for it to finish setup and we're gonna be good to go. All we're gonna need now is to install our mining software. The Windows is finally installed. There it is on this little screen, and the computer is fully operational. It doesn't look pretty, but it doesn't need to be. And there's the installation drive. Now, at this point, Windows is already installed, and this probably concludes the building portion of the video. If you would like to know how to start mining on this computer, I'm going to make another video going over steps on how to start mining with NiceHash. It's going to be in the next video, and I'll post it up, link it up here or up there. I'm not sure exactly where it's at. And I'll also put a link down below in the comments and in the description of this video when the video comes out. So stay tuned for that, and thank you for watching.